Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Wherever you call home, we are there. In favorite places. Large spaces. For many homes, we have coverage that fits the way you live. And with our home systems protection, you can cover major home appliances and more. We cover more type of homes than ever. Get the coverage you and your family deserves. For a free no obligation quote, visit us online or simply give us a call.
We're back at you with Gloves Off, and I got a great guest today from Dad's Resource Center, Mr. Jeff Steiner, and we're going to be touching base on single dads and the issues of non-custodial parents that are out there, especially fathers, in this topic. But there's moms in there as well, and what can be done if you're in that situation, where to get some help, because that's basically what this is all about. How are we doing today?
Great, Professor Buitron. Thank you for having me on.
No. Thank you for doing what you're doing, because it's needed.
Yep.
Tell me, how did you get involved with this?
Okay, so the Dad's Resource Center was founded by Dr. Joel N. Myers. Joel is the founder and CEO. He has different titles off and on, but the CEO of AccuWeather, which is based here in Center County, where Penn State is in Pennsylvania. And Joel had went through some things as a single father, and it took him a lot of time and resources to get it squared away. And once he kind of got it sorted out, he connected with another gentleman by the name of Mark Lynch, who also had gone through some things. And they had the financial resources. They said, we want to do something about this. So they founded the Dad's Resource Center to provide education, resources, and advocacy for single fathers struggling to be in the lives of their children due to the family courts, the county, and the human services systems. They hired me, brought me on board in January 2017. My first career was direct service. I worked basically as a social worker with children and families. Then I managed small nonprofits. And so they brought me on board to work with them to get the Dad's Resource Center open. And we've had hundreds of fathers who've reached out to us that we provided coaching and mentoring who are going through these types of situations. And we also engage in awareness and advocacy. We do a lot of things with other father advocates, particularly here in Pennsylvania, to try to help change the system and make it so that able and willing fathers who want to be in the lives of their children, but are being denied that, try to do what we can to, in the many different ways that they get marginalized or cut out or unable to be there for their children and fulfill their sacred responsibility they're dying to fulfill with their children. So we kind of try to do the system change as best we can too, so that it isn't the unnecessary situations where this occurs. And at the end of the day, the children are the ones, well, the men are unfairly harmed and they're an aggrieved party. The children are the ones who are damaged most when needlessly, because mothers and fathers give different but equally important things to their children, right? And when one of them isn't there for them growing up, they're missing something. And it's harder for them to be happy and successful in life. So ultimately, when that occurs, the children are the ones who get hurt. So
you're absolutely correct. I went through a similar situation. And I know a lot of people here in Texas where there's a lot of advocacy groups. And this is what I would say, it's a pandemic because it's a social crisis. And people say, no, it's not. And I go, yes, it is, because it involves our judicial, it involves our law enforcement, It involves our educational department. It involves our healthcare,
Criminal
and we
justice.
criminal justice, and it's just something that it's a web that entwines everybody together. Everybody knows that there's a problem, and very few people in the heads of those that really are actually trying to do something about it. Until you actually see it and you can pinpoint what's going on, and you can say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to try to stop this. A lot of people go into a divorce. Divorce is it's common knowledge, okay, and it's been going on since Moses. Well, before that, they'll get stoned, and Moses was the one that gave divorces. So let's just, that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, and we're in the time today, is a lot of people think that they're going to go in there and they're going to say, I'm going to have 50-50 custody. That's what lawyers tell you. Then all of a sudden you come out and you're considered a visitor. You have visitation rights. And a lot of these visitation rights are never fulfilled. And it gets worse. The spectrum if the alienation if it started in A, it'll end up in Z real quick if you don't get involved with it. And what happens is, like you said, able and willing fathers. You have a lot of able and willing fathers that are fighting to be involved in their children's lives. And the courts don't want them, the police don't want them involved, the educational system, and it goes on. And yet they say, as soon as you get a divorce and you have visitations, you're considered in the masses as a deadbeat father. And that, to me, I'm like, wait a minute. No, that's not true. So I want to ask you, when you have somebody that goes in, how do you start helping them out with the resources? What are the things that you're trying to do to get that father back on his feet, or get mentally and as well as both physically and financially?
So, as you highlighted, we have a high rate of divorce in this country. 1/3 of our children, 33% of them, are growing up in separated families. We also know that 70% of divorces are initiated by the women. And there's no doubt there's situations when you have men who are bad actors, right?
Sure.
And are a problem. And so that's a factor. And then you have people who just say, you know what, this isn't working. They separate relatively amicably and they work things out on their own. Okay. So we got to acknowledge that not every separated family goes into this kind of crisis mode we're talking about. But if you take those out, a very significant portion of them are where the mother has other ideas about things and the father starts to get marginalized. And a lot of times a man is of the mindset, because what's fundamental to a man is being the foundation of a family, right? Mothers do a lot, right? They do a lot of the work. So we're not discounting that. But at the core of a family is the man. And it's difficult for a lot of men because they may be oblivious, they may be imperfect, they may not be the best husband, but they don't see it coming, or they're trying to continue to hold on to it. And or they're like, okay, well, I'm going to move out and I'm going to be deferential to the mother. And again, if the mother's going to be, the value is, I want the children to have both of us involved, and she enables that, it works out. But once you do that, if the mother is not of that mindset, the man is in a really precarious situation. And there are so many different systems when that occurs that can marginalize them. The domestic violence system, right, which is meant to protect vulnerable people, we all support that, right, 100%, but it can be taken advantage of, and you got to believe the woman, right? And once that kicks into place, you're guilty until proven innocent, not the other. And then that can automatically put you out of the lives of your children. And also the dependency system, fathers get treated as though, because the courts that do family court also do dependency, children and youth matters, child welfare matters. And all those interventions that are in place for abusive or neglectful or drug using or mental health, long-standing generational family dysfunction, all of a sudden the father gets lumped in with them when up to that moment there's never been any kind of issue been reported or any care or concern about them, but they get treated as that by the judges and the lawyers and everyone associated with the family court system if it gets into a highly contested family custody matter. So at the outset, men have got to be aware and know of what they're going into, because a lot of times they'll know whether the mother is going to break one way or the other. But they got to get ahead of these things as best they can, because once these systems kick into place and a father gets boxed into those things, it's really hard to get out of that. So that there's, like you said, there's so much involved with it.
No, you're absolutely correct. And you said something once that gets kicked in. I think a lot of divorces, of course, people they're trying to do it amicably, and all of a sudden an attorney comes in and says you have to do this, and all of a sudden that amicability went out the window. And if you're as a father, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to label you aggressive, violent, what have you, in the court system. You'll see him, oh, he's very aggressive. He's very this. So all of a sudden they start profiling you, and everybody falls into play. Okay. And if you try to say, I like to see my kids a little bit more, you're an aggressive parent. You're a person that's very aggressive. You're coming, so, and that's just the way it has turned out to be, right? And you said something real good that's very, very crucial in this matter, which is another fine point, is the domestic violence situation. You might not have a history, but all of a sudden, and here in Texas, it's very, very common knowledge, especially where I live, the attorneys they use something called a silver bullet. And the attorneys all of a sudden say, we need a temporary restraining order. So they'll kick the man out of the house. Where's he going to go live? Now you have a restraining order against you. You never had any type of violence whatsoever. And every attorney that I've ever seen tries to bring that up. Most judges, they put the restraining order in. Okay? And all of a sudden, now you're labeled as an aggressor. And that to me, and that's never even proven, because a divorce goes through and you could switch out or what have you, and you were condemned without even being able to defend yourself. And it carries consequences, okay? Because you're labeled like that, maybe your job gets it. Some of these individuals are very malicious. They'll send it to the job. Look at what he's going. All of a sudden, now you do not have a job anymore. Okay, you might have a license as a security guard or a police officer. They'll send it off. Okay, and those injustices occur all the time. And what I see, which I've talked to many individuals on both sides of the spectrum of the alienation. I've talked to non-custodial parents, both female and male. When this type of you're in the system gets inside, it's thrown in the system, like what happens to dads, is done on a female, they're destroyed automatically. I mean, they're completely a basket case. It's very hard for them to snap out. Men, you see them going through this, and you see them kind of in an off mode, zombie-ish kind of no care anymore. You can see their emotions change. And we have to be very, very careful, because a lot of people do not understand that suicide, especially in men, the main reason is what we're talking about today. And a lot of people say, no, it's not. Of course it is. It's not talked about. So what can you say to those that are out there? Do you want to see support groups? How do you see that? What do you all do with that?
Well, what you're talking about is trauma.
Yeah.
And because there's nothing that is more traumatic to a parent, whether it's a mother or a father, if they can't be in the lives of their children for no good reason, and they're powerless over it. The way I describe it is back in caveman times or whatever it was, if someone or something took our kids as men, we got a piece of a tree, beat it, throw our kids under our arms, and went back to our cave, right? Like that's our instinct to act, but you can't do that in these types of situations. And so, when people talk about trauma-informed care, that in the human services systems, it's a big deal. You got to recognize trauma and treat people through the lens of trauma. For a man, it's that boiling kind of thing that you just referred to because you just want to do something and you can't, but then that gets portrayed, as you said, as anger and threatening and dangerous, but it's trauma, and trying not knowing what to do with all that energy. It's really important, and I so when I coach a lot of the fathers who are in this a long time, a big part of it is what do you need to do to take care of yourself? And understand that it's going to be a long battle, as I'm sure it was with you. And that initial firefight is high intensity, a lot of money flying. You got financial trauma because you got money just, tens of thousands of dollars just getting burnt for nothing. Um, uh, and so you got to look at short term, intermediate, and long term goals of what you're looking forward to. The short term, the immediate battles you have to do to try to get back into your children's lives. You got to do the psychological evaluation. You got to do this, you got to do that, and these other things. And then interim, like, what do I need to do to claw myself back into my children's lives? I got to do supervised visits because someone said this or that. And then the long term, where you want it to be down the road. And it depends on the age of your children. If they're younger, you can potentially, over the course of 3 or 4 years, if there's some give, get back into their lives while there's still a lot of their childhood left to be able to do that. If they're older and you run into this alienation thing where you're not around the children and they're getting drilled and this and that and this and that because you can't say anything, they're thinking, well, maybe he's just giving up on me, like they're saying. Maybe he's out there kibitzing with this other woman and he's, all these other things. You're more at danger of losing that relationship with your children. Um, so it just the many different variables involved with it. And you got to have family support as much as what you can. Anyone who can be there for fathers. There are a lot of good online groups you can connect with. Uh, but that's one of the biggest things is fathers got to be willing to ask for help because we're not, we do it alone. That's how we are and how we're socially driven to be. But you got to be able to open up and talk to people and find your sources of support to help get you through it because it's going to be a battle for a very long time with a lot of ups and downs.
You're absolutely correct. And you said an interesting thing. The younger they are, the battle's going to be longer. And, it's the pain's the same, but it's going to be multiplied a little bit longer. And as well as the alienation is going to go to the extremes unless there's a divine intervention and it changes, but it usually doesn't happen. And usually kids that I've seen that were alienated, when they grow up, they find the truth somehow. And the person that was doing the alienation is the one that gets alienated. And that I've seen it. And then the same thing happens. And all of a sudden, oh, the father took him away from me because this and this and this. No, you're still the same spiel, and people need to understand that the child is a product of two individuals, and those two individuals need to be in that child's life. One cannot be harboring ill against the other, what have you, within the resentment. The divorce is over with. You have to continue if there's a divorce, and you have to continue and move on forward and be together in the child's life. Work it out amicably and civilly. But the hindrance is when there's a hate or a possibility of an illusion that they can get total control. And once they get that set in their mind, and it can happen from anybody, it can happen. Usually it's from attorneys telling their client that, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, I can do whatever I want. And all of a sudden, guess what? they can do whatever they want. Basically, they get away with it. But those are egged on, I guess. I guess if they're pushed into that realm, and if the person's that type of person has a narcissistic value to her or his character, they're going to go down that route. But what I keep saying, what I want to say is, it takes two to get involved in your child's life. You have to be involved. And one thing I like what you said about the support groups. How in your all's area did you all start any, or do you all have any? And what kind of ideas for those two people out there that are going through this that can listen, can kind of mirror those ideas of those support groups that you have and bring them out or produce more?
We've taken a couple of cuts. Guys tend to be cats, right? They're kind of own thing. So it's been hard for us to do support groups. I do matchmaking. Like I know a lot of fathers that I connect with each other because there's some common cause, like backgrounds or something like that. So we do that. We do have a little group we got going here in Center County with some of our fathers. Uh, the I I'm sorry, I forget I had another point to make with all of that. Let me go back to your point with the children though. When they're going through this, the alienation, when they're in these situations in the homes, and again, sometimes people work out things on their own. Sometimes the man is the problem, right? So we're recognizing that, right? But in these situations, when you have these mothers, there's a vindictiveness involved. There's a beat them up to make them go away mentality. And I've seen this play out in court. They just want them to go away. We'll take the support, but we're going to try to beat them into submission that they just walk away. The children see this and they got to make a business decision, right? Because they know mom has the hand, right? In these instances. And so they got to live with her. And maybe they do love her, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes they don't, they're miserable and they're unhappy, but sometimes they can kind of love her or it's mixed or whatever. But they got to survive, and stay in the good graces of this person because, they just know how it's playing it out. And you were saying that in time, as they become adults, sometimes that turns around. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But and it's painful for the fathers who are going through this to say, you just got to get on that back end and hope. Try to keep your lines of communication. And if that opportunity opens up to you, that you can kind of get back in there on the back end of it. But sometimes it's so horrible and it's, maybe the man's done some things that if that relationship were allowed to continue, he could work through with a daughter or a son, but they're not able to do it. And then they just kind of like, I'm done with it. And they just ride on. Um, so, and ultimately it isn't good for the kids. And I know our one board member I mentioned, he said his children, because of everything they went through, he doesn't think they're going to be able to have really good relationships as an adult because of everything that they went through. And so that's the generational or the downstream effect in the impact when these things occur. It makes it difficult. Sometimes they're able to, they have the resiliency and they're like, I'm going to be better, but it gives them less of a chance and more opportunity that they're not going to be able to have really good relationships, intimate relationships and close relationships as adults.
No, you're correct because it affects in men in all over the place. It affects in their studies and so on and so forth. And like I said, this is a problem of society. There's a lot of different factors that are coming in there, and until everybody understands, from law enforcement to the judicial system to criminal justice to educational to healthcare, and through our religious, because they're also a problem too. They understand it and they continue with it, and everybody has to come down and say, you know what, that is a problem, and start working out to mend that fabric that has been torn, because it's tearing. It's continually tearing. I don't see no end on this tear. It's going to end up one day just go across. I don't see anybody. I mean, I see people trying to mend it, But what we meant here, all of a sudden, something else opens up somewhere else. It goes wider. And everybody needs to come down and kind of sit down and say, you know what? Yeah, that is a problem. We really need to work on this. But educators need to be in there. The medical field has to be in there. Law enforcement has to be in there, and everybody else. And our educational department.
So that's we believe this is the theme that runs through almost every social issue that we have. The criminal justice system, the prisons are chock full of people who did not have their father actively involved in their lives.
Absolutely.
Early teenage sexual activity in pregnancies, a father is not involved. When the father is, much, much less likely. I mean, it's just a whole gamut of things.
Yep.
And people pay a lot of money for all these different programs, okay, to solve these things. And I'm telling you now, my contention would be that people in years 20, 30, 40 years ago, we're old enough to know fatherhood was a little bit different. Fathers weren't as engaged, right? Some were, right? You can have good examples of that. But with each and every day, men, boys, males are more engaged as fathers, is it, rolling up their sleeves, doing the baths, taking them to doctor's appointments, and it's part of their identity more and more with each and every day. And the biggest issue with fatherhood is not the absentee father. That does exist, and we do need to work on that and light a fire under them. The biggest issue are the able and willing fathers who aren't able to, that create the fatherlessness. And you're so correct that everyone knows it's a problem, but there's just no will to really make the big sweeping systemic changes that you need to make. And you've been successful. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Garza down there in Texas. Robert has gone through this thing. He's from Texas, and he's part of the bill that I think you mentioned. He's been part of the legislation like that and done a lot of change down there.
To change it this time around. He was one of the forerunners on this time around for the three-strike rule. Let me tell you what's going to happen with that. This is my opinion. Most police agencies, most police officers have a boss, and that boss is either a strong mayor or a strong city council government. When they start giving out tickets and the moms and the women activists start saying, well, you're doing this and this, that thing's going to go out the window like it's been done before. Many politicians from DAs throughout Texas, police officers, sheriffs, so on and so forth, they have to be elected. And they all tell you the same thing. Oh my God, the moms are going to come after us. The moms are going to come after this and come up. And I'm like, there it goes. It goes out the door. And literally what needs to happen is I like the part that we need three parts in there. The one I had passed when it came to my turn, when they pulled out the gun on me, was a municipality had to vote it in as an ordinance for it to pass through.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
So how many municipalities passed it since it came out? Laredo came out of Laredo, correct? I think El Paso passed it, but how many tickets have been issued? Zero. So you come back to the same thing. Now it's going to be mandatory September 1st. It starts with the three-strike rule, the one Mr. Matza was involved in. And I do not know him personally, but I know that there's a lot of advocacy groups running around. But what I see with that is going to be very simple. The police are not going to give a ticket. Because we're back to square one. And you're going to be out there arguing. And unfortunately, some of the 2503, which is a bill which is a penal code of interference with child custody. Mm-hmm. Some of these other ones have been adjusted, but 2503, everybody's known that it's a criminal act, state jail felony, but nobody enforces it. They haven't enforced it for years, for decades. So they're not going to start doing it now. You start seeing a lot of parents, especially the ones that are fighting for this, that do the reports over and over and go to the police station and get the police reports, the incident reports, the offense reports, and take them to the DA and file something in there. Some of them have been gaining ground.
Yeah.
Okay, some, but in comparison to the masses. So, but besides that, we also have to understand that in our school districts, we have a huge problem.
Okay.
And the problem in the school districts, everybody that you deal with, even if you're involved in your kid's life, the principal, counselors, teachers, the school police, the outside police, the city or municipality police, they all consider the father a deadbeat. And they'll say it openly and they'll say it as kosher as it can be. And what do you do with that? You already have that ingrained in that society. So we have to change it. That's why I keep saying we have to change it throughout the whole.
Let me go back on this one other point with the interference of custody. One factor in that also is that if judges would just enforce their own orders when you go for contempt, they wouldn't have to do that. So I think that's part of their thinking is if the judge isn't even going to enforce their own orders. So, but in that regard, again, and what is really stunning about that is, again, men, which each and every day are more active and involved in their children's lives, and how they can't, how that isn't recognized. Everyone's living in 1950 or 60 or whatever it may be. But it just isn't where things are really at in the world today.
You say that about absent fathers. A lot of before you had a lot of fathers that they were the breadwinner of the family. They were the ones they were the providers.
Right.
And a lot of times the jobs were not 8-hour jobs or 9-hour jobs. They were more like 12-hour jobs and so on and so forth. And I was reading some stats from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up to now. How much time does a father spend with their child? Okay. How much time does a child spend up to the age of 17 at home? Teachers always come out and they say, well, they spend more time at home. Actually, not. They spend more physical time awake, 8 hours or 9 hours at school. And if you have an extra curricular activity like band or football, you're there for 10 hours, or track or what have you, they're there for 10 hours. A child that is now between the age up to the age of 8, and then 8 to 13, and then 13 to 17, probably spends about 30 minutes with a father per day before they fall asleep. They spend about an hour and a half with the mom. It really hasn't changed that half an hour to 40 minutes with the father from the 70s to now.
Okay.
Hasn't much changed, but it has changed the time with the mother being less now than it was before.
Okay.
Okay. So what happens is when the schools say, no, they spend more time with, no, actually you all are the ones that are actually dealing with this a lot more. And what gets me is when all of a sudden the father goes and picks up their child at school, they tell them you can't because you're not the custodial parent. Understand? They give you can't go see them at the Christmas parties. You can't do this because the mom was so vindictive enough to put clauses for the father not to be involved. And those clauses might not even be in the decree. They're just clauses in the school. Okay? And that is what we need to start changing. There's something out there that changes, because you mentioned this. You mentioned the fact that a lot more kids are in jail because of not the parents, the father was not involved or not present in their time. You're correct. You're correct. That's a cookie cutter. And that's like, I don't care whether it's New York or LA or Texas to Chicago. It's the same little cookie cutter pattern. It's there. And we're not recognizing it. We're allowing it to continue. And that's what we have to stop, because it's going to get worse if we don't do something about it.
And again, instead of the money and programs, if there's a father available, like fathers are the answer to a lot of these problems. That's just the bottom line. And I've sat in meetings like state level, the Child Welfare Council for Pennsylvania. I represented because I called them and said, "Oh yeah, we'll have father representation." We'd sit there for half a day meetings, and mothers, this and that, this congregant care, foster care, adoption. Fathers never got mentioned once, like, except when I did it. And people kind of just looked at me and like, okay, that's nice. And that's it. Never fathers when they're talking about all these other things to try to help children and fix, and interestingly, in relation to your school example, I just talked to a father today. Uh, his situation, mother keeping them away from their children, but she's not. A lot of absenteeism at school, tardiness. The judge has an issue with that. And he's like, I never see my kid with the glasses on. So I called the optometrist and they wouldn't talk to him because, they knew about this. And he's like, well, I got the court order and the data ladies, that doesn't matter, right? You need to get something signed by the mother. And he had to keep pushing, and he finally got some doctor, and the doctor gave up and said, okay, you can get the information on your kid. But that's the extent he had to do because his son isn't getting the proper eye care because the mother's not on top of those things.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And that that right there, you mentioned it, the school, the medical field, everybody understands it. Nobody does anything about it. And they'll go in there and they'll put a clause and they'll say, I don't want the father to come in. Or you have what many consider known as a white knight, the knight in shining armor comes into the mom's life. Now I'm the stepfather, then I'm here, I'm the dad, call me dad. Those are the worst problems of everything else. I'm not saying that there's no there's not good stepmothers or stepfathers out there, because there's some very good individuals. But you have a lot of these individuals that are actually the they're egging this on. Understand? I see it. I have a martial arts school. I've had a martial arts school when I've taught kids, not only here in other countries and other cities, for since '88. Okay, and commercially as well as teaching in educational departments when I was in France. Right. Here in the last, I would say, 2008, 2009 to the present, I've had a lot of stepfathers. The father's the one that's paying, the biological father's the one that's paying for the classes. Have the stepfather come in and with the mom say, the father cannot come to go see his child at a tournament or go see him in an exam, or cannot even come see him at practice. I said, really? Is there a decree? If you cannot show me that on the decree, it's not going to happen. Well, if the father comes and picks him up here, this and this, if it's on the decree, I will follow the decree. But if it's not, I could care less what you say. And you see that, and it's that attitude. But if I was somewhere else, I would say, oh, okay, all right. No, you know what I'm saying? We have to put a stop to this behavior.
I had another father who, and I got involved with him for a couple of years after this all had started, and this was a couple of years into it. And the mother was just really effectively alienating the boys from the father, and had moved an hour and a half away, got around it because she wasn't supposed to, but the youngest boy got into wrestling and he was really focused on all of that. And the dad had very little, like every other weekends, and she just found ways to marginalize him out of that. And he would get 3 weeks every summer. And she went into this summer, and it was a pattern. She had done it before where she just didn't do the first visit in the summer. Then they had to file for contempt, and it didn't get in until the summer was almost over. So I went to a hearing over one of these scenarios, and the mom brought his wrestling coach in, and the judge actually took it was stunning how the wrestling coach was allowed to get up and say how important wrestling was to this boy, and he had to go to wrestling camp and not the dad's visit. And I'm like, a judge is considering this. The most important thing to this boy is his father, right? But the judge let this wrestling coach testify as to this. I'm like, what kind of a world are we living in where this man and his new wife is fighting? She said our whole life revolves around us trying to be in the lives of his son. And the judge is listening to a wrestling coach trying to explain why he shouldn't get the last week in the summer that it could be with his kid. And his kid, and for all of this, the relationship has been damaged. You know what I mean? The father actually, that's what we're dealing with.
No, and I'm telling you, it goes throughout. It goes. The boundaries are endless.
Yeah, yeah.
But we have a lot of judges, like you said. Parental alienation starts with a person with a black robe and the gavel. That's where it starts. That's who fertilizes this, and that's who gives it water to start this plant off. And that's where it basically starts. Yeah, we do have, like you said, we have some absentee fathers, yes, and we have some alienating moms before the divorce was there. You see that. Oh, you better do what I say, not what your dad says. Your dad's here. Your dad's never here, so I'm the one that controls the house. And that type of attitude, you see that in different, especially in different ethnic groups.
Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right.
And you start seeing, oh, okay, is it something that's cultural, or if it's not, can you have you have that mother queen of the house kind of thing. And that's basically when that gets divided, it continues.
Gatekeeping.
Yep.
That's the term I hear in some minority communities more so than I hear with my white fathers. Gatekeeping. So yeah.
Yeah, yep, you're right. And you see that, unfortunately. The only thing I say for men that are going through this, if you love your kids, keep fighting for it. Keep fighting for the time that you're going to be in there. You will never be given the time you've already lost. But every time you see them, be the best you can be with them and try to instill something with them, because you're going to spend so much time trying to fight for a weekend that you're going to be losing more in the future. And unfortunately, it's that way. And it just turns people in a different world. I saw how the police interacted. Not only with me, with the many fathers and mothers that I've seen here in Texas that I've talked to, and it's always the same story. The police aren't going to help you. So I I like good badges and I'll back them up. But for me to support them like I used to, like support and back the blue, I don't. That's changed it, and so I've lost that. And there's a lot of police officers that are going through this, what we're talking about as well, and they don't do anything about that. So they have to change.
I think kind of one of the things you're not saying that I'm picking up that I think this, you would think that they would be a little more favorable or you know what I mean, to kind of doing their end of it, but they definitely shy away from doing, being the bad guy, the good bad guy in these types of situations. So one of the things in trying to coach fathers is just you got to understand that thing that we have about justice and integrity that we have. You got to, and they get hung up on it, and it makes the pain worse and it makes it more frustrating, is just to come in and just resign yourself to the fact that it isn't about honor, it isn't about integrity, it isn't about justice, it isn't about what is right and what is wrong. You can have all the evidence in the world, it's probably not going to matter. And it's not about the kids. It's about other things. And at the same time, balancing what you said, the fight. You got to fight it, but separate it to kind of give yourself the mental bandwidth and capacity to be able to function as an adult and have some not be completely miserable in life and consumed by it. So you got to find that space to differentiate that, to be able to really do this battle long term. That's the best piece of advice that I can give to fathers who are about to go into it or who are in it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tell people this: what even if they don't allow you to not allow you to see your child, do not be vindictive and say, "I'm not going to pay child support." Pay it, pay it, get it out of the way. Okay. Do never say, "I'm not going to do that," because that's what they're waiting for. And the moment you do that, bingo, that labeling that they call you as deadbeat will come back and haunt you. So if you have to pay child support, pay it. And this is not about not paying child support. This is about being involved in your child's life. And people get the things wrong. And the lawyers and some politicians and a lot of moms out there think that it's about child support. It's not about child support. It's about being involved in your child's life.
I can tell you many of our fathers trade that off to get access to their children. They're more than willing to, you know what? I'm not going to take you back if you got me in this every other weekend box and I can get the kids more than that, I'll pay. If that's what gets me the access to the kids. I see a lot of fathers who just trade that off and don't even think twice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, we're running out of time. If people want to get in touch with you in Pennsylvania, what's the number they can reach you?
Our website is dadsrc.org. So Dad's Resource Center, dadsrc.org. Go ahead and look us up at our website, and then you have our contact information there.
Absolutely. And continue doing with what you're doing, whichever way we can help out to spread what you all are doing. Please let us know. And if you have something coming up in your area, something you're fighting for, please share it.
Thank you very much, Prof. I find you to be a very soulful person and thoughtful, and I appreciate and I'm honored that you've had me here with you today to talk about this.
Yes, and no, thank you for what you're doing, because a lot of people do not understand what is entitled here. And what's entitled is bringing up good-natured citizens, which is our children, and they're not allowing us to do so.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we'll leave you with this. You all be safe, stay safe, and you all, God bless you. Till next time. Peace. Have you ever wondered about what happens in a martial arts studio? Well, you start right away by setting goals, building determination, gaining focus, building skills, all while becoming more fit, gaining confidence, and learning self-defense. Buitron Academy is a school where attitude meets aptitude. So give us a call at 956-401-4868.